Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Brad Jenisch. Coach Jenisch is a strength conditioning coach at Prospect High School in Mount Prospect, Illinois. On top of being the strength conditioning coach, he's also an assistant football, wrestling, and track coach. Prior to Prospect, Jenisch was a PE teacher and strength conditioning coach, along with a Spanish teacher at Hampshire High School, while doing his student teaching at Normal High School in Normal, Illinois. Coach Jenisch is on the NHS SCA Illinois State Advisory Board. And Jenisch has a bachelor's degree in Hispanic Studies from Illinois Wesleyan University and a master's of education from the University of Illinois. Coach Jenisch has his CSCS, USAW Level 2, NHS SCA, HSS CC, and CFSC certifications. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thanks for having me.
Man, I'm glad to do it. We've had some private conversations for a while, and we're finally able to sit down and kind of dig into a podcast.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to get going and see what rabbit holes we can get down and pick your brain a little bit too. So it'll be fun.
Well, it won't be much picking, I assure you. There's not much there, but I got to spend the week going through some of your stuff. You sent me some stuff that you're doing, and hopefully we cover that. And then I listened to your NHS SCA podcast you did with McGackey. Pulled some stuff from there. So the one thing I took from that is maybe we have a similarity in this is when you started this, it was a passion you had and you just showed up. You did it for free. You put yourself out there. You're like, hey, I want to do this. How were you able to set that up that drew people in and they were willing to use you and take your advice?
Yeah, I think the first thing with that is people can tell when you truly care about something and when you're really passionate about it. And that type of thing, I know for me, that's contagious, right? I want to be around those people. So just expressing that and being able to show like, this is something I truly care about. This is something I'm really, really interested in. It just kind of, you get one and then one becomes three and three becomes nine. And, they keep bringing in other kids or other people or other coaches. And it just kind of builds, right? And you get to have conversations like we get to have right now and just talk about stuff, whether it's in the office, it's in the weight room, it's during an off period during school. And it's just like, hey, how can I help you? Or what are you looking for? Or they come to you and it's, hey, I saw you were doing this with so-and-so. How do I get my kids involved in that? And just being able to have those conversations, I think gets so many more people involved. And you also don't realize how many people are looking from the outside in. So you start with one group, but there's another 10 people that are like, hey, what's going on right there? What are they doing in there? And they just follow along. It's kind of like social media too. I've noticed that a lot, right? You see everything from the outside looking in. You don't know the details of everything, but you see kind of that finished product or those results. And then someone is like, I want to know more about that. I want to be a part of it. And that's when, a coach comes to you or you message someone on Instagram, on Twitter, or get someone's cell number and just like, hey, what are you doing? So you can learn more and then kind of explain all of the happenings behind closed doors. So getting that buy-in, I think, from kids is get them there, get them to show up, right? If you can get them to show up and what you are doing is worthwhile, they will know. They will know and they will see it. And if it is worthwhile, their progress is going to show. In terms of coaches and other people in the building or for me within the school, it's getting that product. And then, when I have the football team and we're doing X, Y, and Z, well, then 3 of those kids on the football team are on the varsity basketball team. And the varsity basketball coach is like, what have they been up to, right? What are they doing, those 3? Because that kid couldn't do that 6 months ago. And then it's like, hey, Jimmy, what have you been up to? Oh, well, I've been, we got this and blah, blah, blah. We're doing this in class, or, I've been working with Jenisch on this. It's just like, oh, okay. And then I get an email or I get a text like, yeah, I saw the progress these guys made. How do we get the other 18 to do the same thing? So I think the product, 1, speaks for itself, but 2, when you get to sit and talk with someone, like you said, it starts from a passion. And when you get someone like you or I, or, someone that's just really, really engaged and wanting to do this just because you freaking love it, it goes a long way, and people can tell. I can rant and go on about it for hours on end if someone just sits and listens, and I can be like, well, we're going to do this and this and that, and I want to try this and do this, and then this kid made this jump, and it just all over. And I think people are just like, oh, well, shoot, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go with this guy because it's an energy, and it's just a lot of fun. I think people can see that. I think it's very visible.
There was a few things in there that I got some notes on. So you hit on stuff that I think I've dealt with in my journey. So maybe we'll take a second and talk about them. But
Yeah,
it's hard to overcome the image people have of you, even though you're working hard to gain knowledge and progress what you're doing. So when you started this, probably very similar to me, like they see you as you're only the Spanish teacher. What do you know about athletic development? You went to
right.
school to be a Spanish teacher. I wanted to be a cowboy, and I was an electrician and had some of those things. That's what you are almost your whole life. You can't outrun it. Doesn't matter what you do. So getting people to look past the idea that you're only a Spanish teacher and start trusting you and start taking your input and like, okay, hold on. Maybe he has done more of this than what we give it credit. How were you able to do that?
I think so. For me, when I wasn't doing any strength and conditioning, teaching only Spanish, which was what I went to school for. That was kind of the plan of just, I'm going to teach Spanish, coach football, coach wrestling, coach track, get my fix through athletics that way. um it was kind of, okay, I'm going to dabble in it with this sport, right? And then you take another step forward and another, and it's just like, okay, hey, what if we do this for football off season stuff? What if we implement this during the track season, or we try doing this in conjunction with wrestling practice? And it kind of just was baby steps. And then as I got more and more into it, I was just like, okay, I think this is something I want to do more so. So is then how, like you asked, like, how do you get people to see that change? And I think it's just putting it into action, right? Because no one's going to know anything, and I'm not going to know anything unless I try it and do it. So it's showing that growth and being able to say, okay, can I take these 5 kids and just try this with whatever coach it may be? I guess for myself, I was coming straight out of school too. So as much as you hate to say it, you kind of look the part. I guess I'm not the bald bearded strength coach. I have a full head of hair and can't grow a beard, but I at least I'm myself, and I think that goes a long way for certain people. I don't think it's everything, but when they see you actively doing those things too, they kind of give you a little bit of, I don't know if it's grace of like, oh, he must know what he's talking about because he does this all the time in his free time. It was kind of just getting that, step by step of proving it to coaches, because the rest of the staff's not going to pay attention to, like, it doesn't matter to them in terms of a school, but the coaches, where they need to see it first, and just getting them to see like, oh, okay, Brad knows this, or Brad wants to try this, and that worked. Hey, what else can we do? And it starts getting them to ask questions. So you kind of just start transitioning over. Getting admin to see that was more difficult, because it's hard to find a male Spanish teacher that coaches 3 sports that wants to actually teach PE and not teach Spanish anymore. So that part was difficult. But when you start to see the value in those other aspects of school, you can't really turn your head and completely ignore it. So, it's different for each group of people. For kids, I think they bought in because they just assumed the semi big dude teaching them Spanish knew a thing or two about lifting. For the coaches, it was people I worked with and experimenting. For those decision makers above, it was more so the results on the field court, whether it was maybe the track too, that kind of thing. They kind of saw it, but they also saw how the coaches reacted and the kids reacted to it, and that environment that was built and the trust that they had. It's kind of a trickle down, I think. In our situation, dealing with high school athletes, it's going to be the kids first. It's prioritizing those kids. And realistically, if those administrators didn't see it, were the kids still getting a good product? Were the kids still seeing results? At the end of the day, that's really what matters the most. So if I could change their mind by showing them that it works, I mean, that was the biggest step, was getting those kids involved. And I could list you off the names of the kids that bought in first from when I started, and then how it trickled down to the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kids. And I could list you by class, by graduation year, how it grew, because they were integral parts to that change of how people saw it, right? Maybe one kid saw it, in the class of 2019, but then 5 saw it in the class of 2020, 20 saw it in the class, right? And it just, then that perception of you changes within, for me, the student body. And then certain kids just only know you as the person that does strength, and they didn't realize that you taught Spanish 3 years ago, when you had that first person that bought in was in your Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 class as a freshman and sophomore, but as a senior, they're in your advanced strength and conditioning class. So it's being able to just kind of work your way to it. But for me, it was the kids, right? Like getting them bought in first before anyone else.
You say that. Way back in the way back, I had a podcast with Mark Hoover, and we kind of got down the rabbit hole you're at now. The importance of building a catalog. And you can look at that from multiple ways. I understand definitely what you're talking about with athletes. It's you think one athlete that does great things is going to bring all these kids in, but it doesn't. It's just this. I thought, the podcast works the same way. Who cares if you have one good one? You need to have 20 good ones so that all those get downloaded. Same with athletes. You create one. Hopefully he brings somebody else or she brings somebody else. Now you, like you said, 3, then that maybe turns into 5. Well, then maybe you go back down to 3 because the buy-in's not, you know what I mean? Then you go up to 12. And then you just talked about it. I view it generationally. I can look at all the generations of our gym, kind of how you mentioned it. And so you say, well, this class, we had these guys, this class, and then they brought this. This is what we changed to help them. This is what we changed to help them. This is so the importance of sticking with it and building a catalog of athletes to grow your overall program, even sometimes when it may seem bleak. How were you able to kind of stick with it and do that?
It was really more so just seeing the growth of that individual or that group of individuals, because I started just to help kids, to get them better. So though it may seem bleak, 7 kids are here, 7 kids are getting better. We're improving. Here's how they're improving. They're faster here. They're stronger here. Whatever KPIs we're looking at. And I know that. And my relationship with those kids is just getting stronger because they see those results. So the trust they have in me, but the trust I have in them, because they show up every day at 5:40 in the morning when nobody else wants to be at school to put in the work. Like, they go out on the field in a football game or a baseball game or a wrestling meet. My trust for them is way higher because I've counted on them to be there every morning too. And their trust for me then is even higher because I've been there at 5:40 with them. So it just kind of, it adds and adds. And, even if it's like, hey, you know what, we're not seeing growth. Maybe we're not seeing growth in numbers in terms of how many kids are showing up, but I'm seeing growth in the individuals that are. And that's going to be the most important thing, because I can't control how many kids show up. I would like to think I could by showing results and creating an environment that's welcoming to any student that wants to be there. But I can't sign them up for the class myself. So it's just being present where you're at, really being present with those kids, because you get them for 4 years at most. Maybe they don't start coming till their junior year, so you get them for 1.5 years, 2 years, and just enjoying their progress, because it is fun. It is so fun to just watch that growth. I just had over the summer, we got camp going on, and there's a kid I met in June. They had no idea who this kid was. He's a sophomore, and we're testing vertical jumps, wherever he's at. He's in the low 20s. And, I noticed that he PR'd one day. I was just like, hey, dude, great job. Like, I saw that you're creeping up on 25. Like, that's awesome. Let's get that next week. From that point on, he's like, hey, I'm going to hit it. Hey, I'm going to hit it. I hadn't interacted with this kid. He'd been a student at school for an entire calendar year at this point. Never saw this kid. No idea who it was. Smashed like 3 PRs the next 2 weeks. And just like, now I've watched this kid go from a nobody to me, right? Because I didn't know who he was, to now a kid that like, oh, I want to see how he's doing today. And I'm scrolling through my sheet of like, what's he hit today? Oh, he's down a little bit. Oh, he's up a little bit, right? Like wherever it's at, but it's that piece of, sometimes they just show up and all of a sudden then you start building it and more kids are there. But that's a kid that, I had no idea of who they were, but that's a growth in numbers, right? That kid just was there, and now all of a sudden that kid's bought in, and that kid's going to bring more kids with again, right? And it comes back to that cyclical of getting more in. And maybe we drop 5 and only get 2, fine, but those 2 are going to be really bought in. So it's just keeping that idea of like, I'm working with these kids. These kids show up. These kids give me 100%. That's all I really can control. And you're still going to have a really, really successful program if you do that. And those kids are in it for the long haul for the 3-4 years you got them. They're going to see progress. And I think we generally as coaches can't get caught up in, no, this isn't where I want to be yet. That's great that you have goals. I have goals too, but I got 13 kids in front of me right now. How am I going to make them better? So it's tough at times when you're looking at it from an overview, but when you're staring it in the face, it makes it a lot easier when you look at it that way.
That I can agree with all of that. That seems to be the path that I've been on. And then there's other things that are just, like you said, that are just out of your control. Can they drive? Do they have a ride? Sometimes it goes as simple as the programs in school are doing really good, so they start believing that maybe they don't need this extra because they're seeing success and they can't correlate. So then sometimes some really good years in sports will actually drop the training down because hey, I didn't do it last year and we won state. I think that plays into it too. But I was wanting to go through some of your, and then we can get back to some of this. But before we spend all of our time on it, I wanted to get through some of the stuff that you had sent me, which was really cool.
Yeah.
I didn't ever think that I would be a kind of a Bondarchuk nerd. It didn't seem like something that I would ever want to do.
Yeah.
But the more I got into it and I spent time in Derek Evely's course and I started noticing that I was using some Bondarchuk principles.
Yeah.
It led me down a rabbit hole that there is a ton of good information to do. Now I noticed on the stuff you sent me, you, especially in your event and sports specificity training you incorporate some Bondarchuk ideas.
Yeah.
How are you able to do that at the high school level?
I mean, so when I'm looking at, the different classifications of exercise, really those bottom 2, the SPE, the specific preparatory exercise, and the GP exercises, I look at that as specifically strength and conditioning. So those are the things that we're going to be able to do in our setting. Because if we're looking at your competitive exercise and, the SDE exercises, that's going to be more of your competitive movement. I look at that as practice. So I want to take care of those bottom 2 things of his, exercise. I put it into a pyramid that I sent you, right? I wanted to take those things and just say, okay, this is where we're focusing. And why that was to kind of have it make sense to sport coaches and to parents and to athletes. Because I think we get caught up in like, oh, I need to do a volleyball specific workout. Volleyball specific workouts happen at volleyball practice when you are playing volleyball and doing drills to work on your skills, especially in field and court sports. Okay. And that's the kind of side note on it here is these exercise classifications, when Bondarchuk made them, was for throws, right? So it's a lot easier to do this type of thing in terms of track and field. If we switch it to field and court sport, it's going to be a little bit different. All right. Because if you're dealing with throws, well, I could throw a different implement, different weight, different size, to get into some of those specific development exercises. Or, if I want to do a competitive exercise, I could do a resisted run in track and field where that's going to be so close to that event, but it's not exactly it, but it mimics those things. So I think looking at it in terms of I'm going to take care of these bottom two areas is kind of how I approached it. The main thing that I really took from it was just train what transfers and measure what matters. So what am I going to see results on, and how do I measure that progress? And I think a lot of us do that, but is, a benchmax really going to show me how they're going to perform on the basketball court? Now, could it make them more, I don't know, athletically prepared? Yeah, I think so. I think being stronger overall is going to make you a better athlete, but it's not going to make your jump shot any better. There's no direct correlation between the two. So I really wanted to approach it that way. And as I got into looking at things, I started to notice, okay, so that SDE exercise and the SPE is you're going to have some overlap there. That's where I see our, plyometrics, jumps, speed work, agility work. And I was like, okay, so competitive exercise in the SDE is going to be really practice, I would say. But where that overlap happens, how do I close that gap? I got into the game speed stuff from Tony Villani and started doing his course a little bit, and I'm tried to go deep down that rabbit hole, but there's a lot, and I've only implemented some things, but the basics of it we've incorporated. And then Scott Leach's starts and stops. So he's got all the competitive games, the drills that essentially look like sport on the field. I kind of try to take those two and apply your game speed, like your footwork and your steps and your change of direction into those games to make it competitive. So that's where I was trying to bridge the gap between those two, because then if you take, I don't know, take the 510 fly with a stop, right, with the deacceleration. So we are going to time that and get a time, shorten the stop as we go, just to kind of work kids into it. So I think I started at, I do everything in meters just because I always have, and I don't want to switch to yards because then it'll change my times and numbers and confuse me. So I do everything in meters just because that's what I've done since I started. So we'll do like a 5 into 10 with a 5 meter stop, and then the next week make it 4 or 3 and just kind of work it down to 2 so we can build into that. But then you'll have, an acceleration game from those start stops. So we'd have, 2 kids lined up 10 yards apart with a cone, or 2 cones, 4 or 5 yards in front of them. They'd have to sprint, stop at that cone, and then one guy's offense, one guy's defense. One guy's got to try to score left or right, and the other guys could try to hip tag them. Stuff like that. So then we're taking that deacceleration that we just timed, put it into a drill, and now it's a little bit more competitive. But I can also take that and think, okay, what do we do? I'm going to use football practice as an example. We do a drill, it's near foot drill every day. So they come straight down, the line, they're sprinting up to speed and then breaking down for a tackle with right or left foot forward. Well, what did we just time in the gyms in February? Well, they took a 15, meter sprint into a stop with their right foot forward. So it mirrors that drill that we do out on the field, but now we're just, as we time it in, in the gym in the middle of the off season, we're still working that skill, but we're not breaking down for a tackle. We're breaking down at a cone. We just switch it to our environment and why we're doing that drill. And now it goes from maybe an SP exercise to an SD exercise. It kind of was cool because I didn't have an intention of like, I want to go through and build this out on, Bondarchuk's exercise classifications. But as I started implementing things, I was like, this fits in really well. And that's kind of where, Al Vermeil's hierarchy came in too, because I almost look at those as like they overlap.
I
Right?
actually just had that note wrote down because that's where I was going to go with it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah. So they essentially, and I'd love for you to chime in and what your thoughts are on here. Essentially, I see like Al Vermeil's like hierarchy fitting where you would see the GPE, the SPE, and into those SDE exercises for like the tip of his speed would be like the right before competitive exercise starts because you need work capacity, general strength, explosiveness, reactive strength, and speed to do all of those things as you build up to get to your competitive exercise and put it into use, into drills, into practice for your sport, and then go to your game. It's almost like a sub hierarchy in the hierarchy. Um, and then, how do we build those things up? But that's the bottom of Al Vermeil's hierarchy is evaluation and testing. And I think they looked at it more as maybe, mobility and that type of thing, where for Bondarchuk, he's evaluating and testing, measuring a distance of a throw, a jump, whatever, I guess bar speed now with all of our wonderful VBT devices, which I love. All of that, well, their foundation is still the same thing of evaluating and testing. So it goes back to train what transfers and measure what matters to make sure we are building an athlete that is robust enough to handle whatever that event game is at the top of that, exercise classification. So that's like a whole roundabout way of getting to to all of that.
Well, where we started using Bondarchuk, probably the most that would align up with his ideas is on our dynamic days. We do not wave like we used to. In saying that, we you can't really call it a wave. We find the weight the kid can move, let's say on a squat at 0.6 meters per second. We're not going to change the volume or the intensity. We're going to stay at that weight until their speed reaches a set point. Once their speed reaches a set point, we will load it up with chains, typically, unless we're peaking or something like that. Depends what we're doing. We'll load it up with chains, and we're going to drag that back down to 0.6, and we're going to start the process over again. That 0.6 seems to be some magical number that creates, for us, freaks. And so we want to stay there as long as we can while still working through that strength curve. We want them to get up there at 0.85, but we're not going to live there. We're going to get back down to the 0.6. That's where we really implement Bondarchuk. But
gotcha.
That's a side note. But as you were talking and I was making these notes, it's funny you hit everything I was writing down. So the SPE, in my mind, you're getting really close, or you're training the movements that are going to carry over to the floor, whether that be a horizontal jump, a vertical jump. You're trying to get the power up. You're trying to get them ready to start delving into these competitive exercises at the best level you can. And that's where my note came I agree. That's where it overflows with Vermeil's pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
You made a good point there. I think that where Vermeil's pyramid starts, Bondarchuk's upper tip probably would come in. I would agree with that.
Yep.
And then the other thing I think they tie into together is like, I think it's the first transfer training book. Bondarchuk talks about not using your bullets before you need to. So if GPP is carrying over to the competitive exercise, at that point, that GPP is really your almost your SDE, because it's carrying over to your competitive exercise. If some sort of conditioning metrics is what they need, so stay there,
right,
until that you quit seeing the carryover, and then maybe it's something else that starts seeing the carryover. Now that's your SDE. Especially, I think, in high school athletes, it's very little. It's not the SDE isn't this big, huge, close to the sport thing. And high school athletics, I think it's whatever carries over to the field.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would agree. As you say that, that GPP is usually, think about a freshman. If you get a freshman stronger, I bet they play their sport better. So, that's kind of how I built out our program and how it vertically aligns is like we have different levels of where you can fit into within our program to meet you where you're at. you got to have your block zero, teach them how to lift and move and how to get after it. I really liked, I was listening to Dane Miller of Garage Strength, and he talked about technical aggression, just being able to attack the little things of lifting and teaching them how to do that when they're learning how to lift, because that's never going to go away. So building that technique, that, proficiency in the movements that we want them to do as they move throughout, and then building strength. GPP is strength essentially for us. Maybe it's some conditioning type things, but you're probably going to build that at practice. We kind of build that strength. You still need to get stronger and get stronger, because if you get stronger, you're probably going to be able to move heavier weight faster down the road, especially when you're just learning how to do things. I have it broken down to, our Learn to Lift, Learn to Train program, which is for our freshmen. We got level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And level 1 is, you need to get stronger. You are not strong or fast enough yet. Pretty much the same with level 2, but I wanted to start bridging the gap into the speed, because you've gotten stronger. So level 1 for us is like APRE 8, APRE 5, maybe APRE 3, and then a short taper, and that's the semester. So maybe we'll work into a combine day where after APRE 3, we'll deload a little bit, just give you a little bit of a breaker. Probably in the school calendar, it falls around Thanksgiving. So you're just going to get a natural break, and then we'll hit some 3s, some 2s, and okay, now we're going to hit some 1s. So kind of how to do it, or maybe it's a 3-rep max, whatever it is. Level 2, and that's now, which is new this summer for me, is we got 7 or 8 OVR velocities, so we can track that bar speed. I've had it for 2 months. I've used VBT myself for probably 3 years. I had a VMAX Pro, it's a E-Node now. So I've messed around with it for a long time, and I loved it. But getting all that equipment is expensive in a school, and you got however many athletes, so figuring out how to do that. But we got some this summer and implemented it, and I don't think I'll ever go back. I love it. I need to get more down, into some of the nitty gritty of it. But I did a Travis Mash Gym Aware course with it. Stole a lot of things from him. I love the stuff Travis Mash puts out on VBT and a lot of that stuff. So when we get into, that APRE, I've now put in some different velocities and velocity thresholds, so velocity drops, to hit the different things we want. So it could be APRE 5, but I could say, hey, you got to hit this at, say, I don't know, 0.45. And you can't let it drop 10% because we're in season. So I need to see that number stay high. But if we're in the off season, you're not in another sport, I could let that drop go to 30, 40% for more of like a hypertrophic effect, to build a little bit more strength and actually tire you out a little bit, because we can. But when you play, 2 games, you got a game Thursday and a game Friday in the middle of basketball season, well, I probably shouldn't be doing that just so you can be ready for your event. So, I implemented that, and the intent of the bar moving June and July this year has been substantially better. It gives them that number so they know they're where they're at. It was really cool to see that. So, I've loved that. So that's kind of been integrated into that first level. But then when you move up and you say, okay, we have some strength standards and KPIs to move from level to level, just to say, okay, you vert jump this, you broad jump this, you ran this 40, here's your RSI. Again, measure what matters, right? So we have something to hit each thing, and then different strength standards. So I stole from, I want to say, Gary Schofield had like a chart of like height and body weight to classify kids as small, medium, or large. And then based on where they fit in that chart, I took from Mark Hoover. I've stolen a lot of things from people over the years, which is how I've created a lot of things, but that's how everybody does it. So it has like a percentage of your body weight that you should be able to hit in each lift. And then to move from level to level, and I want to say it was a Simply Faster article that Mark wrote on this a while back. You have to hit a percentage of that. So say, you're a small build, you need to hit, I want to say it's like 2.25 on your body weight on back squat. But to move from level 1 to level 2, you only have to hit 80% of that. So that's like the end goal. Like, hey, this is where we're saying, I guess, if you want to put in air quotes, strong enough, which I don't think's a thing. But if you want to say like, okay, where's our return on investment with this one? Like you're pretty strong if you're back squat. If you're a 200-pound person, you're back squatting 500 pounds. I'm going to say that's strong. I'm going to go and put that on record that's strong to me. But like we can move from level to level. So once you've hit those, then in the next, progression, now we add percentages. So I can say, hey, you're going to try to hit, and this is almost, this is kind of what I took a lot from Travis Mash was, and it's very, I would say like conjugate like, where it's like, hey, you got a 5 rep max, and this is the suggested percentage, but it's got to be at this speed. So I can say your goal is to hit 78%, but it's got to be at, let's say 0.53, whatever I give them the speed. And they can work up to it. But then something that he did was down sets, right? So drop 10%, do 2 sets of 5 or 3 sets of 4, whatever it is. And I really like that idea. So I just kind of matched it up with Prelpin's chart to fit into the loading parameters of what that optimal range was within that percentage. So if I know that we're hitting a triple at 83, okay, so if they drop 10%, they're going to be between 70 and 75. Then we need to hit, 15 reps or, whatever it ends up being. 18 reps is the optimal, amount. So I just kind of took that total to say, okay, so this is going to, 1, let them hit strength every time they come in because they're still not strong enough. But 2, let them hit a little bit more of power speed work because we're dropping that. Plus, it's probably going to potentiate and move that weight even faster, right? Because we just dropped, I don't know, say you're back squatting 300 pounds for a 3 rep, you're just going down to 270 now. That should move much quicker now. So we're almost potentiating that little like pap in there. Then we're getting a little bit more volume, just not as high of an intensity to kind of keep them in a good spot. And then it also helps them learn how to work into that power speed. So they still touch on strength, but now even though we're not strong and not fast enough, we're stronger than we were in level 1, but we need to start bridging that to being faster and moving, more dynamically so it carries over the field a little bit more. Then once you hit whatever KPIs we have for level 2 to level 3, now you get a strength, power, and speed day. So instead of just having strength, or strength, speed, because sometimes I'll just let them do like a 1.0 back squat, like real fast day just to kind of get used to it. And, just a little bit different of a stimulus for them. We'll get into, having something where we're chasing, 0.3. And this I talked with Vogel about as well, because he puts a bunch of stuff out, and I asked him how he rotates through his days. So we would have, a strength, power, speed day. And to me, power is that accelerative strength speed zone. A lot of people will take it to like 1.0, where I think that's really fast. Like that, you got to move fast if you're going 1.0. I think that's speed, strength, and beyond. So,
and your twitchy kids do way better than your strength kids. That's
yeah. Oh yeah.
Number to achieve. Not to interrupt you, but yeah,
no.
Watched it a bunch. One for a strength kid, the weight's got to get so light that I sometimes wonder how effective that is. Where a twitchy kid, he can be way up there and hitting 1 like it's nothing. He'll have way more weight on than a strength kid will.
Yeah, 100%. Like, but that's exactly it, right? We have to touch on all those things so they get better at that stuff too. Because if you don't train it, it's not going to show up most of the time. So when we get to that, this summer, just to change it up, we did some weight releases, we did some banded work. So I put the bands on the what I consider the power day. So we were chasing 0.75, but you had to stay above 0.6, like you talked about. Our goal is to hit 0.75, but I want us to hit 0.6. If we get to 0.6, keep going. and then we'll just chase getting up there and then bring it back down by adding more weight or more band resistance, whatever it was. But it was our first time using, accommodating resistance with bands. So I kind of did it vice versa of kind of what, and I haven't read the entire book, so I'm not going to claim that I have, but, the West Side's Methods book of like, okay, you should have, 65% band tension and 35% bar weight. I flipped it because it was our first time using bands, and I still wanted that bar weight to be higher, just to kind of get adjusted to it and see how the kids did. But we would still chase that, so they could still put a good amount on there. And we have the Rogue band, so it's got the chart of how much each one is supposed to give of resistance, and how accurate that is, I don't know, but that's what we referenced to kind of give them an idea of what band tension was on there. But that would allow them to then drive, move a little bit quicker, work that accelerative strength where I think a good chunk of our kids were lacking. And then on that third day was that speed day. Okay, you're chasing 1.0. If you go over 1.0, it doesn't count. Add weight, because over 1.0 in the gyms, while we got 3 stations in the weight room, we got 3 stations in the gyms because we have 130 kids. And 15, well, we have a lot of racks, but enough room to run 15 racks, say 4 kids at each rack. You can't fit 130 kids in there. So we'll do dumbbell jumps or plyos or sprints. So then we're doing resisted sprints, dumbbell jumps, vert jumps, broad jumps, resisted broad jumps, altitude drops, whatever it is. That is going to hit my speed strength over 1.0. So that's going to take care of that part of, our force velocity curve, as well as we do Olympic lift. So I'm going to hit some cleans that are hitting 0.7 or 1.7, sorry. Or I'm going to hit, a hip power snatch that's at 1.92. And we're not measuring velocities on that because I don't like how the tether goes when we're dropping with Olympic lifts from overhead or in our front rack position. So I'm just going to, based on my, coach's eye, say that moved fast enough. And if you get it up, it's probably moving over 1.35 if you can catch it, and still be a struggle. So I'm going to assume, which maybe isn't the greatest thing, but I'm going to assume that it's moving fast enough if we're completing the lift on those. So we're still hitting throughout the day some sort of piece at all of that force velocity curve as they move up. But going back to the Bondarchuk, if our GPP stuff getting strong is transferring to the field, stay there till you hit these metrics of saying, hey, now let's add in this. So I'm not just saying, hey, we're going to do this till it stops working. We're going to see that progress and say, okay, now based on what we've seen in your progress, you're ready for something new. And again, it's a quadrennial plan, freshman through senior year. So yeah, if you want to compare it to like an Olympic quad, you got 4 years to peak for this one event. But the problem is we have lots of events in high school, so we can't wait for that. So we kind of got to be ready at all times. So how can we keep pushing them to see progress and continually grow for 4 years? Because I want them leaving from, graduation at the end of May to go and do whatever they're doing. And if it's athletics in college, I want them to be ready to go to whatever room, whatever field, whatever court, whatever it is, and be ready to handle what's being thrown at them. And if we do that, I think we've done our job really, really well. And then their new coach will, put them on a developmental program and start them back over. And that's okay, because then they can see, hey, maybe more GPP work's going to get them and transfer over even more, because we've built up these other, aspects of their training, and they're ready to go back to, hey, we just need more strength work. We need this kid to weigh 10 more pounds to be competitive at the Division II level. Okay, go get him 10 pounds bigger. But then they'll get everything else, and they'll do their system. So, it's a cycle for them. It's just like if you were to change coaches. So it's not that drastic of a deal, but I think it puts them in a position to get those different things throughout their time. And some kids might not leave level 1. I got seniors on level 1 because they're still not strong. That strength is still carrying over to what they need. Most of the time that's like offensive, defensive linemen, because they're just big dudes and they start as not in shape, larger people. And then you start to get them in shape, and strength is still the thing they need to chase, because that's their limiting factor right now. And the speed is going to come from them being stronger. So it's more so like you talk about your twitchy guys that probably move up, and right now it's great. I got two guys that'll just go back and forth on things. One kid's like 5'9", buck 90, buck 85, football baseball kid, and in squat mid fours, bench 3+, and probably clean 300 pounds, like a strong kid. 4'7", 4'7", 40 kid. He just jumped 35.8 something on our vert jump on the sky hook. We got a D1 kid receiver type dude, 6'2", 185, and maybe not as strong, but twitchier, faster. He's a 4'5", 4'4" kid, 40 kid, jumped like a 34.8 or 34.7 or something, and was irate. He was so mad that this kid's beating him. But now we got two kids at two different positions, two different body types, just competing with each other because they've moved through these things and hit those different pieces when they needed to. So what got that one kid there was strength. And I said, okay, hey, you need more speed work, right? Another kid was speed, just fast. There's this twitchy kid. You need more strength work. So you get them strong, and now they're right here neck and neck, but two completely different athletes. But it is cool and it is fun to watch. I got two different body types, two different athletes, and they're just going neck and neck. And one's better at this, one's better at that, and it is fun to get that. And I think that goes back to our earlier conversation on like building that up. These two kids, one's a senior, one's a junior. Okay, that junior, who's going to be his next rival next year once that kid graduates? Who's going to step up and challenge him? And that's my question to the kids is, who's going to catch up to him? Who's going to out-jump him? Is it going to be you? You better want it to be you because he's going to see the field. He's got all these numbers. Do those numbers matter? Maybe not, but it gives him something to shoot for. And if it transfers, if what we're doing transfers to the field, well, then those numbers do matter. And if we're not training what transfers, then why are we doing it? So, how it all integrates together is we need to see that product on the field, but we only get to see that product in a football season. We get 9 regular season games, and then it's 1, maybe 2, 3, 4. You hope for 5, but you only get a few times to see that. So we have to be able to measure that somehow. So if we can determine what matters, we measure that. And, you keep it simple. You don't need to measure a crazy ton of things. I don't know how everybody measures 30 different KPIs. I can handle the 8 that we have, maybe 10. But if we can see that, then these steps and these levels should get the kids to where they need to be or where we want them to be by the time that, they're leaving us. So
now there's a ton to unpack in there. So I'll get through it all the best I can. But
yeah,
you did hit on book of methods, and you talked about Louis running 65% band tension, band tension, and then 35% weight tension. I think at that point he was kind of talking circa max, wasn't he? When he was when he was peaking kids. And what I've seen is that kind of band tension on a high school kid, if you're not careful, will trash them.
Oh God,
it'll
trash me.
It'll take half your season to get them to overcome the hole that their CNS went in. So we while we tried it, we had to try it because Louis wrote about it. At the high school level, I didn't see the benefits that heavy in bands for the recovery time.
Yep.
But that was my experience with it. The other one, another thing you talked about in there was you were talking about Travis Mash. Well, I just listened to a podcast with Josh Bryant and Bill Gillespie. And Bill Gillespie was talking about Josh Bryant's bench press book. So obviously I had to go get the bench press book. And I've been reading through that, but he gets into what you were talking about because he's big on compensatory acceleration. And, obviously that's what we've talked about half this podcast. But one of his methods was to go past the weight that you wanted to move that day. So if you were wanting to move 75%, go up to 90 for a lift, and then come back down and then run your sets at 75 because the ability to recruit and push forcefully, which comes from Verkhoshansky's writings, will increase. So then now you're pushing the weight you would have pushed slower, faster because you went up and got the recruitment you needed. So I'm Yes, we and the other one was he uses isometrics in the same principle. So that
Okay.
you wouldn't have to necessarily go up to their 90%. You could find a few isometrics, hold that, then come down, and then run your speed work or whatever
Okay.
and have more recruitment. I agree with you on the 1-0 and how you break it up. So like we're kind of in the same boat. Our accelerative strength curve is where we kind of live as far as that portion of the curve. And then if we want to get into the faster stuff, we'll use the K box, we'll use high pulls,
Okay.
or we'll use jumps of some sort to drive that. That way we're hitting the whole strength curve every workout.
Right.
Now the focus will change. So if we're doing dynamic, we'll then accelerative strength's the focus, and then we'll hit some sort of max effort, and then we'll hit some jumps. If max effort's the idea, well, then that'll be the focus, and then dynamic effort will fall in there somewhere. Vice versa, it's just the priority switches.
Right.
But you got into that in some of your other writings, and I had a question for that. You kind of run a little bit of a conjugate system, and then you run what I would call a max effort day, a dynamic effort day, and a repetition effort day.
Yep.
Which is very, Louis Simmons-ish, West Side-ish. So how have you, and you do total body, if you're still doing that. So how have you seen that work, breaking up the days? And when you break up the days, is it total max effort work? So you're going to do total max effort work, total body, or are you going to do max effort work with the upper, dynamic effort with the lower, and then the next day switches and then it kind of works? How does that divide out?
Yeah. So when we get into those, that's kind of that upper echelon of athlete. So right now, that's probably like 10 kids for us that have that change in those days. For our large majority of kids, it's pretty much strength based, max effort. When I say max effort, whatever that rep range is, that speed is, all 3 days. So when we do get into some of that, it would be, majority max effort that full day, dynamic speed, that those other days. So we can kind of keep that focus, like, hey, today's a fast day. You're going to move everything fast today. So they can kind of have a one track mind. Because if you mix it up too much, some of the kids can't handle that. Again, your top kids can. So, if I got a kid that knows what's going on, and I could be like, hey, okay, this is going to be speed work today. I need you to get strength work here today. And then we're going to bust out some reps down here just so you get a little bit of a pump, feel it grow a little bit, that kind of thing. We'll mix that in a little bit with those guys. But really, I kind of try to narrow that focus so they can just kind of zone in and go, because I don't want to throw too much at them. Really, when we do get into those other pieces, I can have one-on-one conversations with those kids because there's so few of them. So it's easy to say, hey, my level 3 guys come over here and I have a group of 6 kids and like, okay, here's what we're doing. Go get to it. Because they're usually your hardest workers anyways, because that's how they got to being in that group. The rest of them, it's just like, okay, take them through the nuts and bolts of what you want, and they can kind of run with it because it's easier. It's less complex.
Now we've been going, so I'll start bringing this thing around, but I had some more questions on Vermeil's pyramid and then the podcast I listened to with McGackey. And you talked in there, and it's humbling when you think you've come up with something only to find out that you're just like, somebody found out 50 years ago,
Yep.
And you're just on the back end of it. But I had stumbled on Vermeil's pyramid on just accident, how we were doing things. And I used it not only for the broad spectrum of athletic development, but I started breaking that down seasonally. So for football, hey, right now we're building, most of the summer we built a lot of, now we run a conjugate style, so let me put that out there. But we tried to build a lot of strength, and we kept the dynamic up. But then as the season starts getting underway, we'll harness that into a little bit of power and then up into speed. And then so we use that as a peaking model for each season. And they overlap. I heard you talk about that. So it kind of made me wonder if you break that Vermeil's pyramid down seasonally, or if that's just an overall broad spectrum of athletic development as a whole.
Really, it's just an overall. I won't break it down too much seasonally because we have so many multi-sport athletes. I would say 70 to 80% of our kids play at least 2 sports that I deal with, which is awesome. Or, and this is the other thing that sometimes doesn't get taken into consideration. If you got I'm going to use baseball as an example. You got a baseball kid that the school season is in the spring, but then they do fall ball with the travel team in the months of August, September, October. They're still playing a ton of games. They're still in season. So I can't say I don't feel right saying, hey, this is your off season, because it's not with the school, and you need to just grind yourself into the ground right now and see this product. That's not going to get the kid to buy into things.
And that's the season he's getting recruited in. In all reality,
correct.
The school season's is off season, and his comp season's is season,
which is crazy in itself. but that's exactly it. So that's kind of the overarching, and we're going to touch on those things, and that's when I can make minor adjustments. So say we're dealing with, I don't know, I got we'll use baseball, football, and basketball, right? So I got a baseball kid, a football kid, and basketball kid, and they only do those sports. So they're one sport athletes. Well, they could all be at the same rack in my class. So how do I give them what they need at that time to meet them for their season or their goals or whatever it is? So I could say, okay, here's the prescribed workout. Football kid in season right now in the middle of September, add 0.2 to that speed. That's it. That's the only thing that's going to change. So you're shooting for, 0.4 kids that are in out of season. Okay, sweet. You're going for 0.6. And it's that easy of an adjustment. So realistically, I just probably took off 15 to 20% on the bar. And now it's more, creeping up into that strength, speed, accelerated, where the other guys are sitting in the middle of maybe that circa max strength. So they're pushing a little bit more. Or I can go back to those velocity drops and say, okay, you guys can let this all hit in the same speed. You guys can let it drop 30%. So if we're at 0.4, you guys can let it drop to 0.28. You can't let it drop under 0.36. So then you cut the reps off based on that velocity drop. So we're still getting the stimulus of strength work, say, or circa max strength work. And then, but we're not letting you get so fatigued, because we're cutting you off when, after, say you got to hit 3 reps. Well, on rep 2, it goes below that. Okay, cut your set. And the other guys can then go and hit their 3, and hey, that kid was over, add 10 pounds. So it kind of gets us to be able to just adjust minor things. So I'm not writing 30 different programs. So it's that in itself. We're going to touch on all of those things in the hierarchy, because let's look at work capacity, because I think a lot of people probably don't even touch on that a ton. We'll do a complex on our Olympic lift. So say it's a hip clean complex. We'll go shrug, high pull, hip clean. And then you got, 5 reps of that. Well, that's work capacity. That is not necessarily strength work, but you're going to get stronger from it. And then your technique's going to improve, because if you're doing that with 185, you are strong. That's tough. That's a lot of reps. That's a lot of exposure. But the kid who's still kind of learning and isn't necessarily there yet, the bar with some 10s on 65 pounds is going to be still getting that work capacity, but also getting that technical aggression piece that we talked about, and working into building that skill, because that skill is go back to, I'm an educator first. I'm a teacher before a strength coach. That's what, is my actual job. I'd like to say, I'm a strength coach, but I'm a physical education teacher, was once a Spanish teacher, right? So we got to bring it back to I'm teaching skills. I need to be able to teach that skill, whether I'm a huge proponent of oh yeah, the Olympic lifts are the best thing ever. It doesn't matter. That kid might go when they're 22 and join, I know CrossFit's dying now, but a CrossFit box and want to be able to do those things. Did I give them the skills to be able to go be successful in life outside of this weight room for 4 years? I hope so. I still have to touch on developing different pieces. If I was a math teacher, going back to the Spanish classroom, I can't just avoid teaching a verb tense because I'm I don't like this one. That's not how it works. So, I still have to build those things, and we do that via stuff like that, right? But that's still touching on that bottom of the pyramid, and then it's not neglecting anything else. It's just we're still going to touch on it, and certain people are going to touch on it more often than others. And that's kind of how the leveling goes, because do my, top of the pyramid kids need as much work capacity? They probably put that in the 3 years prior, right? So they've already built up that capacity. And now, because they can lift heavier weights or can run faster, their work capacity comes in their warm up, because it takes them an hour to get up to, well, I hope it doesn't take them an hour to get up to it. But, if we're squatting 600 pounds, it's going to take you a while to warm up to get there. And that's a lot of work capacity. I mean, if I had to go and warm up to go max squat when I was the strongest I ever was, it took time and it was tiring. It wasn't easy. I can't just throw on a ton of weight and go and do it, where some of these kids have 2 warm-up sets and they're at the circa max lift. So we need to build that in still somehow, and that's got to come with our programming. It's overarching, but it's kind of integrated in, if that makes sense as a whole.
So these last couple questions I'll bring around. I know you've added, listening to your podcast, you've added like a barbell powerlifting club to your school. First of all, how's that been going? And then how have you had to adapt your coaching and learn how to coach at meets? How have you put that together as well?
Yeah, so it's going well. We're a smaller club, just trying to get it going. Had some good success when I was at Hampshire. I got lucky and had some really strong kids, and started it when I got to Prospect as well, to kind of get myself involved a little bit more and make connections with students that are interested in that kind of thing, because not everybody's an athlete, but maybe they want to go and try strength sports that are more predominant now because of the internet. So it's been cool. It's been fun. I've enjoyed it. The kids I've hopefully seen them enjoy it. Maybe got them involved in something new. You get some meatheads that want to max out all the time. So let's just feed into that. And then maybe we can teach them the other parts of the training. It's been good, but changing coaching wise at meets and stuff, I personally try to just keep it pretty calm. I'm not going to be, super serious. It's supposed to be fun. If they want to take it super serious down the road, we can get you there, and I'll be there with you. But we want to make the experience good, because I want them to be like, yeah, I did this powerlifting meet. This is something I want to do for the next 10 years. So now they're an active adult into their late 20s. And if you've been doing it for that long, you're not stopping it when you're 28. It's ingrained in who you are. So I'm pretty upbeat, pretty unserious, to say the least. I will goof around with them, try to keep them relaxed, because I feel like a lot of kids get real anxious and like they build up like this idea of like, oh, I have to do great. And as an athlete, I did that a bit too. So being able to just be a little bit like calmer and keep them level is normally I would get more intense in training, because that I feel like that's time to be intense. And hey, we put in the work. Like you're either going to hit it or you're not going to hit it. Me slapping you on the back or screaming at you right now, that's probably not going to be the determining factor of you hitting this bench press. Like that's not it. So, try to just keep it even keeled, have fun, but you also got to play to the athlete too. If the kid's more of a, just like locked in, like calm kid, you got to be locked in, calm. Just, hey, this is what we're going to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Cool. Awesome. If they're, your meathead that like wants to go like yell, scream, slap chalk out, all right, feed into it a little bit, right? Just to meet him, be a little bit of a chameleon. But I haven't really had to change too much, because they've been in the gym with me and training. They know who I am, so they kind of know what to expect. But it's fun. It's definitely a different environment. And especially having coached at powerlifting meets and weightlifting meets, 2 different worlds, I'll tell you that much, which is really cool, but also different approaches. I think you see a little bit more of that like super aggressiveness at powerlifting meets, where you get more of like zen at the weightlifting meets. Not that there's not the aggression there, because there is. It's just it's different. I don't know. I think you have to experience to kind of know. But it's really cool being able to see both sides of it too.
It gives an athlete that may not have gotten a chance to work in a sport individually a chance to shine I think it helps athletes overcome maybe a little bit of anxiety and phobia because they find out once they do hit the stage, it's really not that big of a deal. People may be watching you, but if you're not their kid or their brother, they really don't care what you live.
No.
You know, you do have to be more of like a softball momish coach, because you better bring everything, because you're going to have something go wrong, you know. That's the one my wife does. She does an incredible job at that. I mean, she has everything. We actually had to add some stuff to the list this last powerlifting meet, but the one hard part about it, and I don't know how you've learned to handle this, and this might be my last question here, but you've got a lot of kids that you have to keep track of their numbers, and you've got to put them in a place to be successful, and so you have to watch their attempts to know if the third's attempt's a green light or a yellow light. Are we going for what we said we were going to go to, or do we need to back off because the speed of your second lift? Having those conversations with athletes while you got other kids lifting. How do you keep all that? How do you keep all that in check where you have a solid plan, you're able to work it, and nothing's slipping through the cracks?
Yeah, that's what's tough too, especially because a lot of them are new lifters. So I try to take their feedback of, I could see how something moves and it looks like it's speedy. And they're like, that was so heavy. I'm like, oh, okay, well, it looked like it was one of the smoothest lifts I've ever seen you do. But try to give them a sheet. I usually just use like a Google sheet and share it with them so they can bring it up on their phone of, here's your attempts. Here's, last one was fast, and almost like an RPE type deal of like, this one went fast. Okay. So, it went fast. This is what you're going to. It was medium. This is what you're going to. It was slow. This is what you're going to. You missed it. You're staying at the same weight. So something like that. But then just being able to talk to them afterwards, like, how'd that feel? And knowing the kid of like, yeah, that was fast. I can go up, and being able to trust that they're not just saying it to like, oh, I want to hit this. It's just like, no, like you're the one moving the barbell. I'm not the one moving the barbell. And there's times where I've had others like, yo, that was fast. Go up and wait, and be like, I know deep inside that I'm not moving that weight that you just suggested. And that's okay. Right. Because maybe if you're like, hey, go up 20, be like, 10 is going to be where I'm going to be at. And then depending on what attempt, or are we looking for a podium position? Are we trying to do something like that? Maybe, but most of the time it's, let's have fun. Why don't we hit a PR for you and beat yourself than trying to beat Jimmy from X school who you will never see again. It doesn't matter. We leave with a little bit better feeling that way too. So just being able to have those conversations and giving them some tools to make those choices themselves, because I'm not always going to be there, and there's going to be inevitably a meet or a time or a weight room that I'm not in to be like, coach, what do I do? Like, you got to be able to make that decision yourself too. So just trusting them and giving them tools to make the right decision in that situation. Cause I may have missed it. There might be a couple platforms going on and I didn't see the lift. Did someone record it? Can I watch it? Right? Like those types of things. That's what's nice about technology too. I always tell the kids, have someone record your lift in case I don't see it, so we can kind of go back and watch. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to trust.
Well, Coach, this flew by. It was a great podcast, man. We hit some really cool rabbit holes I haven't quite gotten down, so I was glad we were able to.
Yeah.
I think our systems are somewhat similar, so it made for a really easy conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, well, I appreciate your time, and I'll get this out, and I think people should enjoy it. We hit just some really fun topics, I think.
Yeah, no, it was a blast. I love being able to sit down and talk shop. Like I can yap for a while on things. So, and anytime anybody got questions, just reach out. Like it's always fun. Brings a smile to my face usually. So,
well, I'm glad this was able to do that. So I hope you have a good rest of your afternoon, and I really appreciate you sitting down with us.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, Voodoo Power listeners. Thanks for watching and spending a little time listening to the coaches that we present on here. The channel has been growing because of community, and I really appreciate you being part of it. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button, leave a comment to let me know your thoughts, and share it with someone who might enjoy it. Those small things make a big difference in helping the channel reach more athletes and coaches. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next video. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you on the next one.